Welcome everyone to our BEPA seminar every Monday, and it's a great pleasure to introduce, I would say, one of the most experienced, but also one of the most visible German members of parliament, Dr. Norbert Röttgen, who has been in the German parliament since 1994, and he has held various important positions. He studied law in Bonn. He did a PhD on the European Court of Justice, joined the CDU, I believe, as a high school student, relatively early on, but held important decisions. In the first Merkel administration, he was the chief parliamentary secretary for the CDU, working with Olaf Scholz, who had the same role for the SPD. So he was a close collaborator for someone who later became chancellor, and they had a close working relationship then. Then, for those who are interested in the environment, Norbert Röttgen was the Minister for the Environment, Natural Resources and Nuclear Safety. And for those who are interested in climate change, it was actually him who announced in 2011 the end of the nuclear power plants in 2022. And it was a decision after Fukushima that he communicated publicly. So those who are interested in that theme can go back and see how things have developed with nuclear energy in Germany, pros, cons, and so on. He, for many years, became the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the German Bundestag. And he is probably the most prominent MP on foreign policy, defense, Ukraine, in the media constantly, and is one of the most respected voices, not only in Germany, but internationally. He's a board member of many, I counted almost 20, non-profit organizations, among them the Club of Three, which is a cooperation between France, Britain, and Germany, Atlantic Brücke, where he's the vice president, that's a German-American network, and, for example, also the Hertie School, one of our partners and rivals as far as public policy is concerned. But he is also an intellectual who is interested in academia, and he writes himself, and his book, Democracy and War, was published just before Trump was elected. When we read it, we see there's speculation what might happen if he is elected, what might happen when Harris is elected. And we want to place his talk in the context of the book, but an updated version. And the book covers the major issues on Ukraine, Russia, on China, on the Middle East, but also democratic challenges and how democracy deals with the foreign policy challenges that Europe is concerned with. So we're looking forward to your presentation. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then we open it up, and we also have an online audience, and we might get questions online. So thank you very much for joining us. The floor is yours, Dr. Röttgen.
Thank you very much. Will I stay seated or stand up?
Whatever you prefer.
I would say if I stand up,
yes, that's fine.
The communication situation seems to be a bit better. Then we can see each other.
Yes.
Dear Hartmut Meyer, dear Professor de Hoes, dear students, I want to start by saying that I'm really honored by this invitation, and I feel even more honored by your decision to attend this event. So thank you very much. For me, it's a big, big pleasure. I want to speak about 4 phenomena, about the coincidence, the interconnectedness, and the consequence for us, Europeans particularly, of the 4 following consequences, 4 following phenomena. A, the crisis of democracy, which I think all Western countries are in. B, the return of land war to Europe in a way that we have seen in past centuries and thought it would be a matter of history for all the time ahead of us. And then we were caught by surprise that war in this historic sense came back to Europe. C, the erosion of global order. And D, the US turning from its former role as a leading and shaping international force with unique ability and unique willingness to do so, shifting from this traditional role to abandoning its international ambition, becoming unpredictable and at times even disruptive to the international system we have seen so far. All of these four phenomena we are facing, we are dealing with and are forced to deal with, are the exact opposite of what was at the center of the time we call the post-war order. We had democratic stability as a new era. Oh, this makes things even more effective. And the fourth element, we have seen the United States as the international power with unique ability and willingness to shape international order. From the date the United States decided to join World War II, the United States decided that European peace and European security it's not only an interest, but it's a genuine American interest. This was at the core and the foundational decision the United States has took in 1944. So we are seeing the opposite of what constituted the international and particularly the European order in the post-war and the post-Cold War time, and this has come to an end. So this couldn't be more fundamental, more profound, more revolutionary in era. A long historic cycle in international and European history has come to an end, which does unfortunately not imply that a new order has emerged, but we are living in the famous Gramsci time of interregnum, which famously is now known as a very dangerous time, and Gramsci has proven right also for our time. It is dangerous. Since these phenomena reflect the fundamental change in our historic environment, in our political environment, in our political systems we are living in, the erosion of system, and since these phenomena have been constitutive for our political systems, both domestically, nationally, and in a transnational, international way, these changes make up for one consequence, which has the quality of an identity question. When everything what constituted our political orders is changing, is in a flux, isn't valid any longer, we have to decide a question. And the question we have to decide is, for us Europeans, who and what do we want to be, since we are in a new, fundamentally new environment, and Certainly, there is no option when everything changes to decide we do not want to change. If we were to take the decision, we just want to stay and be what we have been in the past, we would be the object, the target of change, and would not shape anything of what is our role and could be our role in the future. This identity question, who and what do we want to be? I want to elaborate on this matter and topic in 4 points of reference, anchor points indeed, in order to make clear that there are different points of reference in which we in which we have the opportunity and the chance to develop a new understanding and notion of ourselves. So the 4 anchor points I want to touch upon and deliver some of my thoughts are the following. The one is Russia's war in Europe and what it means for us. Russia's war in Europe means the attempt to re-establish war in Europe as the continuation of policies by other means. This is a famous phrase of Claus von Clausewitz, a Prussian general, who described war and warfare as the mere continuation of policies with other means. But we are not living in the late 18th, early 19th century, but this understanding of war as the continuation of policy in combination with the technology of warfare in our time would mean something fundamentally different. And this describes what is at stake for us. If we were not to succeed in making this attempt, re-establishing war as a tool and instrument of politics, a failure. Not only Europe, but the world would be forced to learn a lesson. This attempt was not a failure indeed, it was a success. And it would have a fundamental impact on how we were and how the peace, freedom, and international order would emerge from this experience. So, what our goal as a part of the emergence of European identity as a consequence of this is that our policy and we Europeans have to strive and to do everything to make war a failure in order to achieve a ban on war again in the 21st century. This attempt has to fail. Otherwise, we are not going to see a Europe in peace and in freedom. Ukraine is the battlefield, but the cause of this war is a new political order for Europe. So it's not a Ukrainian war in that sense. Ukraine, as I mentioned, is the battlefield, but it is a European war because it is the cause of this war is the political order of Europe. And we have to make sure that the attempt that Russian imperialism prevails has to be a failure. The second anchor point I want to elaborate a little bit on is the United States and how we should understand the new foreign policy the Trump administration is pursuing. I would characterize the new American foreign policy on Europe as the redefinition of American interest, as I already mentioned earlier. It's the shifting from the definition of American interest expressed in the decision to join World War II against Nazi Germany. That implied the decision that peace in Europe is a genuine American interest. It was not a war for European interest alone. It was a war for American interest, because if Nazi Germany were to succeed in Europe, it would immediately affect American interest. This decision has been valid for 80 years. And the new American foreign policy on Europe can be seen as a withdrawal of or can be seen as an abandonment of this fundamental definition of American interest when it comes to Europe. European security, peace in Europe is not seen any longer under the Trump administration as a core and genuine prime American interest. This is of fundamental interest, of course, for us Europeans, because the previous definition of American interest founded and forged the transatlantic relationship very successfully over decades, and was at the core of the successful outcome of the Cold War and the transatlantic efforts to shape international relations in the years after the end of the Cold War. We Europeans should not adopt this analysis of American interest. We should recognize this. We have to face the reality, but we should not adopt this analysis, because in my eyes, it's a wrong analysis. We are interconnected, and even not a country like America with supreme and unique power would be able to navigate successfully through this time of globalization, where everything is interconnected and where no autonomy and sufficient supremacy can be achieved if you decide to go it alone. So everybody, and particularly in a time of globalization, needs allies, friends, partners, and the global competition, which is of course already in full swing between America and China about the character of a new international order, will be decided not also by the question who has more friends and allies in the world. So we should not make the mistake to adopt this analysis. We should have seen before that the traditional role of America regarding Europe had come to an end, because America is overstretched by domestic challenges, industrial, economic, social challenges from inside, and the comprehensive challenge of the American international role by China. So nobody could realistically in Europe expect the American foreign policy from the times of the Cold War and after the Cold War to be continued in the same way. This has been illusionary for quite a time. And even if not Donald Trump had got elected, but Kamala Harris were elected, we would have seen a change of course in the American foreign European policy, of course in a different tone, in a different way, but there would have been a shift from a European focus to perhaps a focus on China and other regions. So the fact that we are not prepared for that, the Europeans are to blame for that. However, the depth and the fundamental cause of the new orientation of American policy is something we should not adopt and accept. We should navigate now the new American foreign policy. We should soberly analyze European interests, and
and from my perspective, it's a European interest to keep America in Europe, to keep America engaged. This is what the prime objective now of European of the foreign policy of the Europeans vis-à-vis Donald Trump and the American is about, to keep regarding the Russian war in Ukraine, to keep America as close as possible to Europe, to keep America in Europe, has been at the core of the success in the past and should be at the core also in the future, and this is a European interest. In this relationship, we should not seek independence. We should recognize the changes. We should try to keep America in, but we have to become stronger in the relationship. I would not say we should become independent, but we should become stronger out of our own. This leads me to the third anchor point I want to briefly touch upon. This is, what does it mean for European, and if I may say something about this, for German foreign and security policy? What are the consequences of the two first points I already mentioned? And the main consequence is that we Europeans are now on our own. There is no other country, no other power that will organize European security instead of us. Either we are going to do it, or nobody is going to do that, and then our security is in real danger. We have to draw our consequence out of the fact that what we have experienced during the Cold War, the last previous 80 years, as American protection, particularly during the Cold War, has shifted into dependence, a security dependence, also technology dependence, and we have to see that the American administration is ready to conflate security dependencies with economic dependencies regarding the trade policy. So there is the conclusion to get stronger in more than one direction in economic and technological aspects, and also in security aspects. Have we started doing that? Are we living up to this new challenge of becoming the organizer, funder of European security? I would say fundamentally the Europeans have now understood the situation. Are we quick enough? Are we substantially enough? Certainly not. What has been decided in Germany? I would say some significant decisions have been decided. You already, of course, have seen that Germany has changed our constitution, the constitution. We have abandoned the infamous or famous debt brake in only one area, and this is regarding security and defense and support of Ukraine. So there are no limits now for German lawmakers to make debt for these objectives. This is a fundamental situation, so money is there. And money is also there in a fiscal sense as a result of the debt brake. The German debt GDP ratio is slightly above 60%, compared to round about 120% in France, a bit more than 100% in the United Kingdom, and round about 140% in Italy, for example, which already hints at a European problem. Among the big European economies, unfortunately, there is only one left that has significant, substantial fiscal leeway, not only from a regulatory perspective, but from a markets perspective. And this is, of course, a European weakness. If there is only one, it might be the strongest and the largest of the economies, but this is a significant weakness we have to deal with the fiscal restraints from a market perspective. The European the large European economies, apart from Germany, are facing. So the debt brake has been abandoned, and defense spending has surged in the meantime. In the budget in the 2025 budget, we have an increase of the national defense spending up to a bit more than 80 billion euros. We are going to see in the 2016 budget more than 100 billion euros in the budget for defense, and it will increase to around about 150 billion at the end of this legislative period in 2029. So really significant numbers of defense spending. It would be in total numbers unprecedented. In a share of GDP, not unprecedented in the Cold War times in the 70s. And so we had higher defense spending in Germany, I suppose also in other European countries, than we have today. So the total numbers are unprecedented, but the share of GDP is not unprecedented. We should keep in mind this difference. However, we have to, and we are now working on a new bill on conscription. So in any regard, fiscal, industrial production, where we have to Europeanize our production, we have to scale up sizes in order to get down prices. It's absolutely necessary in a transnational effort. No country can do it alone, but we have to cooperate on a European level in order to become competitive. And the third is the personal pillar of increasing our defense ability and capabilities, and we are working on that and will pass the bill end of the year. My fourth and last element I want to briefly only touch upon is that all these efforts and the challenges in foreign policy and regarding the defense ability and capabilities of Europe are, of course, interconnected and interrelated with the internal condition our democracies are in. And I started by saying that my assessment is that we are in a state of crisis of our democracy. The phenomena of crisis are to be seen everywhere in any of our democratic systems. Either we see the fragmentation of political landscapes, or in the two-party systems, we see the radicalization of one of the traditional parties. We see populism, we see extremism. So this is a significant weakening of our democracies in a time that, from an international and outside perspective, our democracies should be the strongest, because we have now the strongest challenge that we have seen since the end of the Cold War. So what all our democracies and governments and societies are facing is the simultaneousness of fundamental change. It's the erosion of global order. It's the new technologies. It's the end of the socio-economic contract that was at the foundation of the stability period we enjoyed domestically, economically, socially during the Cold War times. So the redefinition, the innovation of a new formula for a renewed socio-economic contract that makes people and the vast majority feel that democratic systems are working for them individually, that they don't need to feel let down and let alone. This is at the center of a socio-economic new formula that has to be found. And this is the interconnectedness, if we Europeans were to fail to make the war of Russia against Ukraine and the European order a failure. Our democracies were at peril, because this would then be the military and by this political victory of imperialism, of anti-liberalism, of suppression, of dictatorship. It would not leave our democracies unaffected. Be in no doubt about that. If we were not to be successful in re-strengthening, refounding the socio-economic architecture of our societies and of our democracies, also a strong foreign and security policy is in jeopardy, because without the assessment of ordinary people, our system is working for me, we might get in danger that there is sufficient support for a rational security and foreign policy serving the security interests of the nation. So we are really in a challenge of simultaneous fundamental challenges, a redefinition of new order, a response to the question of who and what we Europeans want to be. There are many options. No option would be to decide we do not want to adapt. We do not want to respond to what makes up our reality today. But it's a political challenge, it's a psychological challenge, a communicative challenge, and a democratic and intellectual challenge. And for that, we have to work together. We have to exchange experiences and views. And this is also one reason why I'm so grateful for this invitation and for the opportunity to discuss with you. And I am very much looking forward to doing so. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Norbert, for this extremely stimulating big picture approach to where we are in Europe. But you didn't expect to come and not be examined by me. And so let me try to ask you a few questions before I open up to the audience. One is China. And whoever has followed your political views, one can say you were one of those who were early in calling for a tougher line against Russia, critical of Nord Stream 2, and one of the earliest debaters also critical of China and China's influence in Europe. When the German debate shifted around 2019, 2020, you were very vocal. And we didn't hear about the China component in the overall transatlantic relationship and what does it mean for Germany in particular. And in your book, you cite Constanze Stelzenmüller's 3 outsourcing strategies that Germany had: sourcing security out to America, energy to Russia, and growth to China. And all of 3 have collapsed. Where's the China dimension in your analysis? That's my first question to your overall, where does Europe fit in? And then I have 2 more ones, but I start with the big one first.
So yes, I think this was a really precise and summarizing line by Constanze Stelzenmüller. So the 3 pillars of the German economic and political success, you mentioned already: growth, energy, security, all of them outsourced to others, and all of them have collapsed. So what are we doing about China? There is no way that Germany, particularly as the largest trade economy of Europe and a very large also by international measure, has to start to reduce our economic and particularly growth dependency from China. Nobody is advocating decoupling. This is more or less the same as I said about America. There is no way of decoupling from the 2nd largest economy in the world, comprising 1.3 billion inhabitants, while shrinking significantly in the decades to come. But of course, China is a reality and a power you can't ignore. You can't ignore, but you have to be realistic about the uncontested program of the new leadership, which has fundamentally changed the architecture of Xi Jinping has fundamentally changed the architecture of the entire power system. And part of this power system and program is, and they are explicit about it publicly, to use economic dependency as a tool of foreign policy. So they won't be nice to us in a situation of any kind of conflict. So let's assume an attack on Taiwan, which of course would mean a fundamental attack on a fundamental principle of international order, and we would have to react and to respond to that. Not with military means in the first place, but certainly with economic measures and sanctions. So we would be counter-sanctioned by China, and more or less the entire German industry would be in the hands of the Chinese leadership. And for this, the reduction of dependency is a matter of preservation of our sovereignty. It has gone so far. We have to do that, and there is no way around it. It has become even more complicated as a consequence of the new American trade and foreign policy, imposing sanctions on the Europeans and in a way abandoning European interests and declaring the European Union as a kind of, was it enemy? It was more than rival, being invented to weaken America. So has, in a way, put us also regarding the trade and political relationship on China in between China and the United States. We would prefer to agree with America as Europeans, and particularly Germany, on a common China policy. Including trade, tariffs, and other elements of foreign policy. But there is no offer of the Trump administration to do so. And being challenged with the war of Russia and having to deal with grappling. This is the word I didn't find. Grappling with the energy problem coming from this war to Germany. So it has become even more complicated. So a common transatlantic policy would be more necessary than it has always been in the past. So this is the predicament we are in, but it does not lead to the conclusion that we couldn't afford a renewed China policy to reduce dependency. All experience in the last 3 years give proof that we have to be quicker with that, and there is no way around it.
So I think I open it up now. I have plenty of questions, but I'm sure the audience has many questions and better than mine. So we may start here, then there. I think we have 4 already, but I think we take 1, 2, and then 2 others, please. And please introduce yourself briefly.
My name is Florian Oedle. As you can say, here from the name, I'm also German. And you mentioned that we changed the constitution to really skyrocket in our defense spending, which is important as we have some capability gaps, not just some many. But I would argue, especially the last decade, our biggest problem was not our defense spending. It was rather how efficient we spend, as we spend in the last decade similar amounts as France, as the UK, but still we have way bigger capability gaps as them. And the defense minister made some changes already in the specific department responsible for purchasements. However, it seems like we still are a bit stuck with that problem. So how would you say we get even more efficient with the huge amount of money we have now?
Mm-hmm. Yes, second. In the front. No.
Hi, hello, my name is Noah. I'm also from Germany. My question would probably jump on the idea you mentioned who we want to be as Europeans. And I think a different question that is also important to look at it is who wants to be part of becoming what we want to be. And I think a notion that is important, that is the idea of resilience. And especially with like the younger generation, I see a lot of people who are, to put it diplomatically, not really willing to put their life on the line. I mean, you mentioned the conscription, for example. So as a policymaker, what would you actually do to make it more attractive for young people to be actually willing to do not just like military conscription, but also a civil year or some sort of stuff? Yeah, thank you.
So 2 questions. And a week is a long time in politics. You might refer to Pistorius's willingness to buy F-35s as opposed to Franco-German Defense Cooperation. And then you were in the position to negotiate with your coalition partner the lottery solution to conscription army last week, which has led to a public debate. And that's related to these questions. And you might want to refer to these two incidents.
To aspects of this.
Yes.
Yeah. So buying American weaponry is on the one side, there you are. On the one side, could be characterized as a quite efficient way of spending money. It is certainly on the other way, no way out of European dependence from American security provisions. So it will not make us more competitive, and it will not lead and contribute to the buildup of a European defense industry, which I expect to emerge in a time of some years. So it's okay, but it's not the solution and the answer to your question. Have we been so greatly inefficient? Yes, but I would say this is true for all Europeans, because what we have been doing over decades is that defense industry has been seen as a major part of industrial policy of the nation state. So where is the revenue? If you spend money, then you want to have the revenue for your own economy, and you do not want to share it with others. This was a thinking of a time when war was not considered to be a serious case to reckon with. This has changed, and now we need the defense industry for the prime goal to serve our security and not to serve the creation of jobs in the first place. And for that, this thinking has to end, and this was the major source of inefficiency. And there is still resistance. There is still a lot of protectionism, particularly in this time when state demand is so high that you have the best business cases in your company history, and you don't feel the pressure as a company to go transnational and European, because it's only for public reasons and not for business reasons. So this is the challenge there. And the second question was the motivation of
who do we want to be, and who wants to be part of who we want to be?
Yeah.
About the conscription
Yeah.
army and
you wanted that I say something about the discussion about the bill. So I'm not at all pessimistic about the attitudes of young people in Germany and their recognition and their ability to talk to them in a serious way of what our dangers and challenges are that we are facing. So I have quite a lot of discussions with school classes, university classes, and so on. And I see listening young people having their views, having their questions, expecting leadership from politics. And there is an opportunity. I tell you this, there is a real window of opportunity for political leadership in this time, because the time is so serious, is so challenging. And so honestly, I don't see if politicians were to talk honestly, seriously about the dangers for a peaceful, safe future, particularly for the young people, not for the elderly, but particularly for young people. I think we can win over a sufficient majority, and this is what you need in a democracy, not 100%, but you need a proper discourse, and I would say this is what we are lacking mainly and mostly, a proper discourse about the seriousness of what we are facing and what the potential of good policy can achieve. We are not submitted to some natural fate. It's in our hands. We are strong societies, strong countries, and we can shape the course of the future. And so I think we can have a good discussion on that, and we will find enough motivation and readiness to contribute to the betterment of the society, of democracy and freedom and peace. So I'm not in doubt about that. And one element of that is, of course, that we can spend as much money as we want and buy what we want, even more F-35 fighter jets, if there are not people, citizens, ready and able and trained to defend the country and our alliance, it would all be worthless. And for that, we have to recreate our army. We have to be more attractive for, not we, but the army, the Bundeswehr has to be more attractive for people, to convince them to do their voluntary service for 6 months, 8, 12, or 2, 4, 6 years, or be a soldier as a profession. So we have determined to enhance the attractivity for that, but we have to prepare for the possibility that a voluntary formula will not be sufficient. And then we have to rationally and incrementally increase instruments. And the core insight, the 4 parliamentarians, the 4 leading defense politicians of the coalition parliamentary party groups, the vice chairs and the spokesperson, have come to is that we have to start our concept, or have to put it at the core, at the center of a concept, is the definition of the military demand for an optimal, the best army. We have agreed on NATO ability targets, and so we know what Germany has to deliver. We have to deliver by 2035 260,000 professional soldiers and 200,000 reserves. So we do not need conscription for everybody in 1 year, but we have a specific demand, military demand, and we have developed a model and a concept from voluntary to selective mandatory conscription as far as it is necessary from the military demand. This has been discussed now. It has been challenged by the defense minister. My view is, if I may say publicly, that perhaps the major problem for him is that it was developed within Parliament, but this is the way a democracy makes legislation. It's not by decree of the government, but it is done by negotiation, by discussion within parliamentarians of coalition parliamentary parties. And I'm very, very convinced that along now the parliamentary legislation process, which we will have with all the elements that are applied usually, we will come to a quite convincing result at the end of the year.
There were additional questions. The gentleman here, the gentleman there, and then we go into the lady, maybe the lady first, and then we have the two gentlemen. Yes.
Thank you much. My name is Hannah. I'm also from Germany, and I apologize to everybody else.
May I ask one question? Who is not from Germany in this room? Oh, quite a lot, yeah.
So the next questions will definitely be from non-German speakers. And I thank you very much for the thoughts that you shared, especially also on the question of democracy. And I would like to sort of jump on Noah's questions as well of who wants to be part of our democratic system in Europe, and also who is allowed, or who do we want to be part of this. And I believe you really referenced the sort of new or renewed socioeconomic contract that we have to build as Europeans. And in light of the recession that Germany is going through right now, and the need for a lot of skilled workers that should migrate to Germany, 300,000 for context annually, to sort of just maintain our current social systems. We're not even talking about innovation, just to maintain the status quo, as well as the fact that there are 25% of people in Germany that now have some sort of migration background, as we say in Germany. How
25,
do you,
yeah.
25, exactly. How do you envision the socioeconomic contract and who should be part of that, especially as the German leadership has made other comments in recent days?
Yeah.
That this is about migration,
Yeah,
and comments, and Stadtbild and so on.
What is Stadtbild in English?
And then we have here and there the two, Jordan as third one. Okay.
Hi, this is Robert Thomas. I wanted to ask just a bit about your thinking on what it means for Russia to fail in this current war of imperial conquest. And in particular, what is a threshold of failure that is sufficiently convincing to the variety of audiences that need convincing to make it clear that this is not a viable path forward for dealing with political issues in Europe?
Yeah.
And then Jordan.
That was a good question, Robert.
Yeah. I agree.
I'm Jordan, also a student here. So I mean, identities in the title here. And I think you also said that the erosion kind of that's happening in democracy, or the change, is kind of bad timing, considering the events. But doesn't it feel like natural timing, right? It feels like this is actually the impetus. This is what would cause a democratic kind of deconstruction. And you defined the
De or reconstruction.
I think deconstruction, but but then you said it's the what and the how, and obviously that's true. And I want to make sure I'm understanding it right, because is there not also a why? Like, why does Europe exist? Why does the EU exist? Why do Europeans collectively pursue this goal? Is it security? Because if it's security, then maybe the why isn't changing that much. But is that really how Europeans pursue and dream for this goal? And so does this fundamentally challenge identity, in that there needs to be a new why? Like, are we no longer pursuing the global liberalism that was promised postmodernism, like, oh, we're safe because of collective kind of markets, or do we now need to reformat that? And is that what we're seeing with these parties too?
Okay, so Hannah, your question, I perceived your question particularly that you are addressing the openness of our societies, migration and integration and absolutely and certainly this has to be a central element of a socio-economic contract, because it means the recognition and appreciation of the world we are in. We are living in a globalized world, and we will continue to do so. And it's for the benefit of our societies. And the better it is you appreciate realities and shape them and work with them, instead of creating the illusion that there would be could be and would be a world you wish to be in that separates nations and societies from each other. It's not how I see the human being. created equally with equal rights and equal dignity. So it's not the world I wish to live in. If I wished such a world to live in, I would have to recognize that it's an illusion and not reality. So this has to be made a major element. It's particularly true for aging demographies and societies, which Germany and Italy and other European and among others the Chinese society are. So it's not only it's an economic necessity to do so. What I would also say is that there is also a need and a necessity to have to organize the process. And this was certainly something which has caused discontent and discontent and even another word, it's more than discontent. So if people experience that their governments, that the state and statehood lacks control in general, and particularly over their borders, they feel insecure. So this is what I was by asking myself, what is the right term? This creates a feeling of insecurity, and this is something governments and states have to avoid, to make their citizens feel insecure instead of protected, and to try to organize this process as best as you can, because globalization and the migration of people has so many routes and causes that you have to be cautious of what you promise. But to try to organize the process of migration, I would say, is a prerequisite for creating the perception of a government that is able to provide security and openness at the same time. So this combination is what has to be perhaps yet to be better invented for the future. What is the definition of Russian failure? This was more or less your question. You could also ask, what is the definition of victory and defeat? It's the same. So if I start with what is the definition of victory and defeat, I would say the definition of Western and Ukrainian victory is the Russian failure. What does failure mean? Failure, in my view, means not the reconquering of territories, means not the military defeat of the Russian army, even not on Ukrainian territory. But it means that Vladimir Putin and the Russian army becomes bogged down, gets stuck where it is. So that over time, the calculus of Putin has to change, because then over time there are only massive costs and no revenues. If there were no progress, no advancement on Ukrainian territory, so if the Russian army were stuck, in other words, bogged down, then this military stagnance would lead over some time to a adaptation in the political concept, because nobody, even Russia, and certainly not Russia, with a heavily indebted, inefficient, and suffering economy and citizenship, were able to continue this war if the calculus were to turn out so negatively. So this is the very modest, as I think, but very rational definition of failure or defeat or victory. The question of Jordan could be perhaps formulated also in how I perceived what you said. Why? So is there not only a who want to be? Who do we want to be? What do we want to be? But why do we exist? Was your question? Why is it that the European exists, and what is the reason or and the rationale of the European Union? And I would say what has been the rationale of the birth of the process of European integration and of the European communities and now the European Union has remained the same. European history was characterized over centuries of inter-European war. So in the first place, this absolutely unprecedented idea of the post-war European integration process was a peace, was the idea of peace. After 2 world wars starting in Europe, we have to come to, and after the history of wars, from the 30 Years' War to so all the wars Europe saw, we have to put an end to the history of Europeans being at war with each other. And having the 2 countries that stood for the hereditary enmity, France and Germany, at the center of this decision to end the history of inter-European war. So this remains to make the European Union the most successful, impressive peace project of human history. And the second purpose of existence of the European Union was what is Wohlstand?
Prosperity.
Prosperity. Okay, I thought it perhaps a more
Welfare.
poetic word, but welfare. This is a better word.
Welfare.
Yes. So
But peace, prosperity is usually
peace and prosperity. Yeah, it's usually what you are teaching your students. Yeah, yeah. So
all our
okay,
textbooks say, and
I take your textbook say it, so I should use it. But I have an emotional preference, a linguistic preference for welfare. So whatever. So you know what I mean.
And we can say Draghi, competitiveness, welfare, and you can open this whole box. And how are we doing, Norbert?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so this is what I meant, and with the help of Professor Meyer, has now been expressed. Yes, this was it has been the second big historic success of the European Union, and now perhaps there has to emerge something that originally, before the internal market idea, was the idea to found Europe, the defense Europe, the defense union, as we would say today. So making the Europeans being in a foreign policy and security actor, not only internally, not waging wars against each other, but being a force for peace even beyond our borders and for our borders, not within the borders, but for our borders. So these 3 purposes of peace with each other, prosperity and welfare, and peace for Europe, not within Europe. These are the 3 overarching, impressive purposes for the existence of the European Union and the reasons why we should work for the success of this peace and prosperity project.
Yes. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, first of all, for these remarks and for the.
Please introduce yourself.
Yes, Marcel. I will continue. My name is Marcel, and I will continue the row of German speakers here. But we'll try to maybe make the subject a little bit larger. We are right now all talking about how to rearm Europe, how to defend Europe, how to have a victory, or how to let Russia fail in Ukraine. My question is, do we as society as a whole, or as a political system, do we not have the responsibility to not forget about the other topics that, for example, shaped your career: environment, nature conservation, and also the social issues that lay behind it? And if we agree on that this is a common and shared responsibility, how can we achieve that, and how in today's society can we achieve the bandwidth of all these different topics?
Yeah.
Yes. Then we had a second one.
Thank you. My name is Hannah. I'm a teaching assistant here. The poly crisis you have outlined has led to a domestic challenge in the form of far-right populist parties in a number of European countries, including in Germany. This is obviously a serious challenge to the kind of decisive policy making you say is required right now, I think domestically and at European level. So I'm wondering how you think we should be handling this challenge, and if your party was right in voting for the 5-point migration plan in January 2025, despite the votes of the AfD being needed for passing that bill. Thank you.
And the third one in the front.
Hello, my name is Jasper Rügemer. I'm just curious because you mentioned Putin. I wanted to kind of dive into that a little bit. How can you be sure that he would secede at any point and not utilize his allies such as China, North Korea further to fight this war effort? And additionally to that, I also wanted to touch on the societal kind of war effort situation we have going on in Europe, but also in the United States. In the United States, the military is described as a hollow, it's a hollow core, hollow force, essentially. And I would argue that that is because of the approach of the generation, as you said, my generation, Generation Z, and the social media impact of that. And so what is happening on the US side is they're strategizing on how they can make it more appealing through social media. You can see this presently, their efforts to do so. But how would you address this on a more Europe-wide level, not just within Germany? Because I believe this is, well, it is a global phenomenon. And so if you or anybody has an answer to address this, that would be a fundamental breakthrough in the securing at least of European democracies through engagement of a younger civic society. So yeah, thank you.
On Hannah's question, you may talk about what is happening in the Presidium right now. In your party.
Yeah, good idea. So the first question of Marcel, that we must not forget all the other challenges and perils we are clearly seeing, like, for example, climate change. And you are absolutely right. This is, I would say, a new quality. Hannah called it, and it's often called polycrisis. It is, as I mentioned, it is, and as we know, it's a quality of simultaneousness we are facing. One of my, and we have to deal with it, and I would say that so far our political systems, governments have not yet found a recipe how to deal with that. Not only that it is a particular challenge to the communication of policies, because there might be only a limited degree of the ability to perceive complex policy problems presented by politicians in the media. which is a communications problem. But I would say you were more referring also to the question of the organization of policies in order to respond and shape these topics. And as far as I see it, and I would say I can certainly see it in Germany, what is necessary as a consequence of this interrelated, disruptive nature of challenges we are facing is that we certainly would need a new type of organization of governments. In Germany, we are more or less organized in the way Konrad Adenauer organized his first government. We are organized in silos. So we have ministries that are in charge of a certain portion and area of reality. But unfortunately, reality does not recognize the competencies of ministries, but they interrelate, they interconnect, they are disruptive, they ignore plans and so on. So we have to organize governments in a more, this is nochmal, wenn es nicht getrennt ist in silos, it's interrelated, interconnected ways. So we have to better reflect the interconnected realities in an interconnected organization of governments. As universities and what they are teaching are more and more interconnected areas and not separated areas, governments would have to adapt to that. Democratic governments, perhaps also autocratic governments, I'm not an expert in that, but democratic governments are very slowly in adaptation. Political power systems in democracies that are building up from the bottom to the top and are not directed from top down, are very slow in adapting to fast changing, shifting realities. This is in that way not only, and you touched upon that, it's not only a policy question, but it's a challenge to the organization of policy making in democratic institutions and governments. And this is complicated. And I would say this is one area where in order to achieve more acceptance and by this legitimacy from citizens, we have to better adapt in order to be more adequately productive and deliverable regarding the problems. So it is seen, but it's not I would say not properly and adequately implemented in the organization of governments. Yeah, please.
Do you see any aspect of like the country of the world or a particular aspect where you see that?
So there's one small, perhaps perhaps there are experts in this room who know better. What we are now in Germany starting to develop is the establishment of a national Security Council that aims at integrated challenges. For example, hybrid attacks on German security. They are digital, they are maybe civil, they may have a terrorist background, they are using different instruments. So that the Interior Ministry, the Defense Ministry, and other ministries are affected by this, and they want to organize it in an integrated way. So this is one, I would say, some element to at least try to respond to this new nature of challenges. Apart from that, do I see major?
I mean, in the classes, the Americans are always surprised how much the silo thinking is in Germany, because in America it's much more integrated. I bring policy planners into my classroom, and they do scenario planning, and they say, this is for the German Defense Ministry. But we don't talk to the people who actually find solutions, and we're not talking to this, and we're not talking to that. So that attempt, and the Americans in the classroom are usually, well, when I was in the Defense Ministry, and of course I talk to my counterparts and so on. Then we talk about NATO cooperation on defense planning, and it's not joined up thinking to an extent that you would expect an alliance. When we talk about Franco-German relations, when we think about joint defense planning, it all sounds much more integrated than it actually is in practice. And I think your advocacy for more integration and more interdisciplinary interconnectedness and so on. You mentioned Adenauer. I mean, it's a bit of a joke. We remember the first Adenauer administration when it was very integrated, when the party leader, Konrad Adenauer, always talked to the Chancellor, Konrad Adenauer, and the Foreign Minister, Konrad Adenauer, and they were fully integrated and they had full agreement at the time. We don't want to go back to that, but that was until 1952.
If I were to tell Friedrich Merz that this would be a very modern kind of organization of a government, if he were everything in his person, perhaps he would find it tempting.
He thinks he's a foreign policy chancellor. He thinks he's a defense chancellor and so on. But jokes aside, we had the concrete question about Hannah and the 5-point plan. But also you might refer to what is happening today in the Presidium when the CDU plans how do we deal with the challenge of the far right, the so-called firewall, the Brandmauer, in anticipation of 5 regional elections. 2 of them look very challenging, with opinion polls suggesting in Saxony-Anhalt and in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern that the AfD might be so far that a 4-party coalition or a cooperation between CDU and the AfD is an option.
Yeah. So what I would, yes, I was in former times a member of the Presidium of the CDU. I'm not currently, but of course I know about the discussions, and but they were publicly reported what the results were. And not at least they were presented by the chairman of the party, Friedrich Merz, so the chancellor. And what he communicated is what is also precisely my view, that now, given the given the share of votes the AfD is drawing on the national federal level, but also in different portions in the different Bundesländer, more in the east, where they are the strongest party by far, close to 40%. They have, with very, very, very few exceptions, I would say, apart from Berlin, if you don't count Berlin as a new Bundesland, then there is only one constituency that the AfD did not win in the last federal parliamentary elections. So this tells you something about the situation in the East. It's different in the West, but also on the national level, they are at 25% now in the polls. And you have to really analyze how do you evaluate the development of the AfD. And of course, it's my assessment is they are not any longer the party that is a vehicle to express anger about the failures of the other parties, but over time, when they more and more publicly and in parliament express their radical anti-democratic views and their xenophobic attitudes and so on, these views and attitudes are shared by a significant portion of their voters. So more or less scientific research says 50% or so. So there is over time, and now I would say it's now the time that particularly the CDU, this is how I see it, is in charge and is now determined to take on the fight against the AfD. when such a party starts to develop and jump about the 5% threshold, perhaps you might say if we refer to them, if we attack them, they gain in importance and they seem to be more relevant as they are. But this has changed now with 25% in the national polls. We have really to, and we have started to do so in our parliamentary speeches, to directly attack their permanent attempts to discredit and disparage democratic institutions, procedures, respect, and the entire political system. There is one permanent line they are selling and providing, and this is by any means to create distrust into the democratic institutions of our country. So this is what they are aiming at. And in this, they are explicit collaborators with Putin, who is doing it in both ways. He is doing it by force militarily, and he is doing it by interference in our public discourse with fake news, fake mails. So they are cooperating in the destabilization of the democracy in our country, and they are doing it also, of course, in other European countries. And we have to reveal it, we have to attack it, and we have to create more awareness for voters and potential voters if they are really ready to sacrifice what we have achieved in a long and a multifaceted history, for the first time a successful democracy in Germany. And this is what they are attacking. It's not about some aspect of migration or whatever. It's about the political system and the democracy we have achieved, and they want to attack it.
May I add, I mean, and I think I can dare to say this, not only raising awareness among the German electorate, but also some American decision makers who support this party openly in their public statements. J.D. Vance being one of them, Rick Grenell being another one, and these connections and so on. And this is not on my part a political statement over Republicans and Democrats. This is essentially to understand the nature of these forces and try to prevent external support. Putin is giving it already. If it comes from America in a naive way, couched as freedom of expression and so on, basically for domestic audiences, but to underestimate the nature of these parties is also something that decision makers in the United States should be aware of. I mean, I think I can say this. You are more constrained than I.
No, I'm not constrained in observing that and speaking up what I observe. And no, it's you deserve credit for pointing out this element, and it's really so sad and bitter to see that we have this internal anti-democratic force gaining ground, that it is cooperating with Putin, waging war against Ukraine and the European idea, and seeing the deliberate and targeted cooperation of J.D. Vance and others with all these parties across Europe. It's the AfD in Germany, RN in France, and other parties that aim at destabilizing our European democracy. And all of them share this goal to destabilize European democracy. That's hard to say, but it's the reality. Yeah,
it's a reality, and it's frustrating to see that we all have a responsibility to work against it. I mean, that's my notion. Okay.
Jasper, final question.
Yes, final.
Yeah. Would Putin, no, he raised the question and I'm going to answer. Would Putin stop difficult? Yes, this is a viable question, even if this goal, as I described it, the failure of becoming bogged down on Ukrainian territory were to be achieved. I would say if that were to happen, so nobody knows, but if that were to happen, it would even be highly critical and perhaps impossible for China to support Russia in a way that it would be compatible with the general approach of the Chinese foreign policy of being a not direct military supporter. And then the constraints coming with this general approach, China is certainly not willing to abandon. So I would say if that were the case, I would even say that China, that it would be beyond the possibilities of China to fundamentally change this situation. However, you are right in being cautious about the consequence of this situation, because for Putin, I would rather say perhaps it's not possible also for him to just come home and say, "Oh, I tried my best and I failed with all I wanted to achieve, and it cost more than 1 million Russians either their lives or their health for the rest of their life." So he has already paid a high price. He had to agree in a historically unprecedented dependence from China. So given the Chinese-Russian relationship, this is the lowest point from a Russian point of view in the Chinese-Russian relationship. So it's and for China, of course, to see Europeans and Americans embroiled, spending resources in Europe, of course, has a high value in the possibility or potential to distract America from focusing on China and the Pacific region, in the Pacific. So you're right by being very cautious. I would remain to say it's the best policy we can pursue and the best objective we can achieve. So let's try that. We are not doing enough to even achieve that, what rightly has been seen critically by you.
Let me try to finish with two questions. One is personal and one is a call for hope.
That's good.
The personal one, and you may answer it or not, and you can say, we all know, and we read it in the press, that the Chancellor offered you a particular post to be German ambassador to the United States. You decided to go against this. I'm sure there's a personal one, but were there professional considerations as well that made you decide not to play that role in this government in transatlantic relations? And the other one is, where do you see the hope for Europe? By what mechanisms can Europe rise to the challenge? And what do you think is the outlook for European strength in this particular challenge? So,
I hoped you would express hope, but I will try my best to see where it comes from. Okay, so the first topic, I don't know anything about it. And
it was in the Bild Zeitung.
Oh, really? Yeah. So I'm not a regular reader of the Bild Zeitung, so I haven't read it, so I can't comment on it because
a former chancellor said he needed Bild and Glotze. But...
Yeah. But and hope. So there are many sources for hope. I believe in the unpredictability of history, so we never know what happens tomorrow, in 1 week, in 1 month. So history and the entire picture can be different, and it turned out in the past to be in a so positive, which nobody expected to be. It's a few weeks ago I talked to a former citizen of the GDR. And she talked to me how she felt about German reunification only a few days before the wall came down. And remember the politicians who didn't have a clue of what was going to happen. So a lot of things can happen also in a positive way. I fundamentally believe, and I have no doubt, in our European ability to adapt. We are really strong societies. We seem weaker. We seem really weaker than we are. Our ability to innovate, to adapt, our valuing of tradition, of rules, of our democracy. We have a strong resilience in our democracies. So I fundamentally, with all my intellectual and emotional capacities, believe in us, in the Europeans, to perhaps be a little bit slow at times. But once we have understood what is going on, we have immense strength to adapt and to shape things for the better, not only for us but also for others. And in this quality of us, I strongly believe, and this is the source of my hope.
And my hope is in the room, because it is, I think the future of Europe depends on national politicians committed to the project, aware of the problems, making the case for Europe, committing their lives to it, and working day out and domestically and internationally. And Norbert Röttgen is an example. But also the next generation of those who are possibly less optimistic, but more committed to defend what we need to defend in a transatlantic alliance as the anchor of the free world, addressing the challenges that you have so brilliantly summarized for us. So the hope is with all of us. So thank you, Norbert Röttgen, and thank you to the audience for stimulating. Very good. Thank you so much. Thank you. The students want to take pictures, a little chat, social media, and I think you can coordinate with them, Peter, and just
Okay. So,
yeah. You could see that there was real interest. Yeah, there's. Yeah.